Arrow Video has put out a new 4K UHD limited edition release of the 1994 slapstick comedy superhero, kind of anti-superhero film, The Mask, starring Jim Carrey. And as you can see, this is a very thick deluxe edition. Kind of like most of their releases, the majority of them end up kind of like this, with just a slipcover. And there's some nice limited edition contents within this as well. But some of them get the deluxe treatment, like this. And here's the In the Mouth of Madness, which I recently did a review on. But in this video, we're going to talk about The Mask. We're going to talk about this movie. Now, I saw this movie when it came out in the theater, and I later bought a VHS tape of it, and I've seen it bunches of times. But this is a brand new 4K transfer, and we're going to talk about that transfer. We're going to talk about this release. We're going to take a look at this packaging, and we're going to talk about the movie some. I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films, and as you can see, I'm an avid physical media movie collector. I've been doing review videos on this channel for over a year now, and you can check out all my previous content on the channel. Now, Jim Carrey, when this came out in 1994, everyone knew him from the show In Living Color, which I watched, and he was the white guy on the black show, which it was a hilarious show from what I remember. It might hold up, I don't know, but he played that predominantly a fire marshal Bill character who was in a heavy makeup, and he'd come in and just like wreck people's houses, trying to show them fire code and what they were missing with the fire code, like rip the walls up. It was friggin' hilarious. But he still does it. He did it really good in here, even in The Mask, but just that physical comedy, and he was the perfect fit to play this character. Now, of course, the same year he did come out in the movie Ace Ventura and The Mask. Both came out in 1994. At the time, it didn't seem like it was happening all in the same year. Back then, time went by a little slower for me. But I had a copy of Ace Ventura also on VHS, and I wore that one out. And I can remember most of the scenes when... now, Scream Factory, I don't have it yet, but they did put out a 4K UHD release of Ace Ventura. But I've heard mixed reviews about the actual quality of it, but I'll probably eventually get it. I just haven't snagged it yet. And unfortunately, I don't have the VHS tapes anymore of The Mask or Ace Ventura, but I do have. This is the very first VHS tape I ever got: Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and House. And these are two movies as well that I watched so many times on VHS. I can almost tell you scene by scene each one of the scenes. But I didn't watch The Mask as much as say Ace Ventura or these. But I do have a fondness for it, and it was nice to revisit it. The Mask is based on a comic book. It was a Dark Horse comic book, and I even had a copy of it back in the day. I'm not sure what ever happened to it. Maybe it's in a box somewhere, but I did have a copy of it, and I read some of The Mask, and it was more of a horror comic, and it was very violent. And so, but with this movie, on the other hand, plays it fairly light, and apparently they shot a little bit of dark scenes for it, and they ended up cutting them out, which it really helps the movie, the lightness of it. There is a little bit of, if you think about it too much, there is some darkness to it. Like, this character doesn't do what a normal, like when I say anti-superhero, it doesn't do what a normal superhero would do. He kind of sets up the bad guys. He steals money at one point from a bank to make it look like the bad guys do it. But he doesn't go like dark. Like that, the Mask character doesn't go dark and kill people in this like he does in the comic. The Mask in the movie, unlike the comic book, comes from the very beginning. Very simple. It's inside of this underwater chest. This diver accidentally lets the mask out, and it floats up in the water. And later in the movie, Jim Carrey's character gets it. What's interesting about the way that Jim Carrey has to do this character, like a lot of the movie, when he's not wearing the mask, he has to kind of play a normal kind of geek guy, a guy who's working in a bank, and he's just kind of he's not having the best time. He's living by himself with his dog, and so that character, and then when he puts the mask on, it becomes completely Looney Tunes, and it puts it on, and his whole face turns into this kind of green thing with he had these prosthetic pieces on his face, and it looks friggin' great, and he just kind of comes to life with this very cartoon character, aided by some very nice computer generated effects that actually enhance this and makes it look like a live action cartoon. It's not like and it does remind me a little bit of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, just like not like a straight cartoon, more of like a computer generated cartoon. Even like the feel of the city here reminds me of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, because it almost feels like it takes place in an earlier era. It doesn't like really, like a lot of it seems timeless, but there's a little bit of technology from the time that's seen on hand. You do see some VHS tapes, not these like this or House or Indiana Jones, but he's watching some VHS tapes of some cartoons at one point, which kind of play into like what he does later. There's like a wolf cartoon, and later on, at one point, his face turns into a wolf and he's howling. It's friggin' hilarious. And some of that part where he turns into the wolf looks more kind of like a cartoon than anything else. Kind of like a kind of from like a very advanced CGI cartoon, like a Shrek, but still the background still got that same texture, like the real texture, where it's not. It's like in a way, you've probably seen the movie anyway. So I don't know, but like in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, you got the real cartoons in front of you got the real cartoons. You got the cartoon characters in front of the real background. So it's kind of like that here, but it's completely bonkers once he turns into the mask, and it's so much energy involved with that character. It just comes out of the screen, and it's so much fun, and it really contrasts the other scenes. The scenes where he's not the mask, and just it's just a huge contrast in the way that everything is played in the scenes, and it's quite delightful. Actually, I think I enjoyed it more upon this watch than upon the original watch. I think it holds up really well, and I think a lot of that is because of course of Jim Carrey's performance, but also the way that the director handled the timing and not making it kind of seem like an older movie, but still kind of taking place in around 1994, I assume. I recently did a review of Spawn, and you can check out that review on that channel. And before I get into what I was about to say about Spawn, if you would do me a favor, if you would like this video, it helps a little bit, and I'd appreciate it. But Spawn, and I bring Spawn up from 1997 because it is based on a comic as well. It is based on a dark comic, just like The Mask is based on a dark comic. But Spawn went dark. But it is, Spawn comes from hell spawn. So this movie, unlike The Mask, this one needed to go more dark, I think, for it to be successful. I don't think it went dark enough. And the animation here, there's a lot more in this, because The Mask has a pretty good bit of animation, and it looks really well here because it is supposed to be like a live action cartoon, and it looks that way. Spawn, on the other hand, is supposed to not necessarily, it's not supposed to be a cartoon, but a lot of the animation looks very surrealist, and it looks like a cartoon maybe, or like a sketchy cartoon, especially when they go to hell, and that did bother some people. I remember back in the day talking about those scenes and not liking them, but I get the kind of the feel for what they were going for, and really I think this almost works, but it doesn't quite. And maybe if they had gone darker with it, maybe it would have worked better. Anyway, back to The Mask. Let's go ahead and take a look at the physical packaging of this thing. So it has a very nice slip cover on the outside of it. And maybe I can get this open. Oh, here we go. I was able to retain the plastic on here. See how that way it can maybe be protected from dust on the shelf. Okay, so on this front part, it just has M with the mask. On the back, this is what the mask looks like before he puts it on. And inside of this, we have 3 items. We have the disc. Now, when it comes out standard edition, probably eventually it's gonna look like this. This is what you'll end up getting without all the bells and whistles. We have a poster we're gonna look at, and we do have a booklet. So let's first off take a look at the poster and see what's going on. We have a double-sided poster, and one side has the cover art that's on, which I really like this. That's a cool cover. I really dig it. And on the back of it, we have him, just a white cover. Jim Carrey, The Mask. That's a cool poster, and I like the way, I mean, it's kind of, if you wanted to really hang this on your wall and it's all folded, that kind of sucks, but it's cool it's folded, and you can just put it back in the release, and it doesn't take up any more space than what's on the shelf. Before we get into the booklet, I do want to take a look at this. So we only have one disc in here. Now, here's an advertisement here. It says Wild Style. I've never heard of it. Maybe an Arrow upcoming release. We have one disc, a 4K UHD disc. Arrow did release at the same time as this a Blu-ray release. I didn't get both of them. I didn't double dip, but it's kind of frustrating because a lot of these boutique labels will put out 2 discs. For instance, like Criterion, you open it up, and there is a Blu-ray, and there is a 4K in there, and it's nice to have both of them because it's nice to be able to compare the quality of the Blu-ray for one thing, and two, if you go over to somebody's house and they don't have a 4K player, they have a Blu-ray player, you have both options. But anyway, so I opted for the 4K because it's going to probably be better than the Blu-ray. I haven't seen the Blu-ray, so I can't compare it. I think the Blu-ray will probably have the same transfer on it. That would be my assumption. Here's some cards that come with it. On the back of the cards, you have the poster, and the cards are black and white. Here he is inside of this bar. Here he is with Cameron Diaz's character. This was Cameron Diaz's. It says introducing in the opening credits. I am assuming it was her first movie. Sometimes it's an introducing and it's not their first movie. And here's during one of the dance numbers. There's a couple of really awesome dance numbers in this film that really kind of make the movie. There's Peter Green's character. Peter Green was also in Pulp Fiction, and Pulp Fiction came out the same year as this in 1994. It was a pretty awesome year for films, and that which reminds me, in that movie also, Pulp Fiction had that very famous dance sequence in it as well. This one has 2 pretty awesome ones in it, and then there's Cameron Diaz's character again, and there's Amy Yazbek, I believe that's how you pronounce her name, and there's I can't remember his name, but he's the actor that plays his friend in the film. Let's go ahead and take a look at this booklet. As you can see on the front cover, it is black and white. You got Cameron Diaz's character Tina here. It says bombshell explodes at Coco Bonga. You open it up, and what do we have here? It is actually color on the inside. And then we have the contents are cast and crew. This is Mask of Dreams. So there is an essay on page 7, and this is original production notes, and then about the presentation. And I'm going to read to you about the presentation when we get to that part. And there's the cast and crew list, and you have Jim Carrey in his regular type of clothes, and there he is as the Mask with a Tommy gun. And here's some more pictures of him in different masks. Now, the mask is also worn by another person during the course of the movie. Like a villain ends up with it at one point. He looks pretty cool. There he is with it on him. He looks like a villainous Hulk character. And the dog, Jim Carrey's dog, at one point ends up with the mask on his face, and it's friggin' fantastic when that happens. That dog is like a Jack Russell Terrier. It's friggin' great actor in the film. Really well trained dog, and he's able to do several things. Here's the dance number in the middle of it, which is just quite fantastic. That whole sequence, and then there's more of the mask. So there's a lot of pictures in here. Here he is with putting the makeup on. There's a little bit of behind the scenes about this in the movie, and it was nice to know that it was a lot of that was prosthetics, and Jim Carrey was doing most of what you see. Now, obviously, some things he couldn't do, like some of the way the character moves in a way a person couldn't move in a very cartoonish way. But he does a lot of it himself, and it's the energy in this movie is friggin' out of sight. And you can feel it from the second he puts that mask thing on. It just makes such a big difference. So let's go ahead and take a look at specs. And when I say difference, that's not really what I mean. I mean, it's nice that they have him playing it straight, and then he puts the mask on, and it's just like comes off the screen. And kind of like Ace Ventura, if people can't handle that type of comedy for in your face like for that long, it may be tough. Some people don't like that type of comedy in your face all the time. So it's kind of nice that this breaks it up, unless you want it. Unless you want it cranked up to 11, like the whole movie. So about the presentation. The Mask has been restored by Arrow Films and is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1:85:1, which is widescreen, with a 5.1 in stereo audio, plus a new Dolby Atmos mix exclusive to the UHD presentation. The film is presented in 4K resolution in HDR and Dolby Vision. The original 35mm camera negative was scanned in 4K/16-bit resolution at Warner Brothers Picture Imaging. So that's very impressive. They actually had the original camera negative and not the interpositive. The film was restored in 4K resolution and color graded at Duplatech. The Dolby Atmos mix was produced by Deluxe. And so that kind of tells you there's little more information giving credits to the people who did all that. Now it's great they had that 35 millimeter original camera negative, and they were able to do a brand new grading on this film, and it looks friggin' fantastic. I think that there's quite a contrast between some of the scenes, but like those scenes where he puts the mask on and everything gets bonkers. It looks much more colorful. That green mask, once he puts that on in the HDR grading, it just like really just pops out, and it looks really great. It's nice there is a contrast between that and the normal scenes, especially the scenes when he's in his apartment. Everything looks a little more brown. It looks very brownish. And even in the bank scenes, kind of mundane bank stuff going on when he's working. But that is nice because it's nice to have that contrast for when something crazy happens. It looks different. And really, the source material for this movie, the source looks great. I didn't see an abundance of film grain. Now, you can kind of see it a little bit. I don't think it was, as far as I could tell, I don't think it was scrubbed. Now, sometimes on some of the close-ups, maybe it doesn't look quite as crisp or as much detail as you would think from this type of movie. But hopefully that was like just the camera wasn't quite there with the focus, or not that it looks bad. I'm not saying it looks bad. I'm just saying I'm just hoping it wasn't scrubbed to get rid of some of the grain, because I didn't really see any problems with any film imperfections, no dust or debris or anything like that. It all looked very clean, and it looks almost like brand new in a way. It looks almost like now they shoot it digitally, and they don't have any real film grain in there. But if you look close, you can see that film grain. It's all very nicely resolved. It's all very consistent throughout the film, and it's not really going to catch your attention at all. So if you don't like seeing film grain, you're going to really like seeing this. But in general, the resolution, the resolution and the clarity look really nice throughout the movie, and it really, I think especially the scenes when he is the mask really look friggin' great. And yes, they're animated, a lot of them, but they're not all necessarily all animated, because it's like he does wear these prosthetic pieces, and it is like real. It is like, and that's the thing. Like back then, they had computer generating for part of it. Most of this movie, the sets and everything, all the textures of this 1940s type of background really look really great in this 4K. Now, it does have an HDR grading on it, which is going to enhance the color, and it does enhance the color, especially like the green mask. But in general, even the skin tones look really natural. I don't have the Blu-ray to compare what it would look like without the HDR grading, but I would think that, like, typically once you see HDR grading on something, the black areas become much more deep and much more rich, and then the skin tones end up being a little more lifelike, or the colors that really pop out in certain scenes when it gets more vivid. And this one does get quite vivid in some of the scenes. I do want to talk about the dance numbers now, and a little like this Cameron Diaz's character. And I remember when I saw this movie, and I just thought she was fantastic. And watching it again, I still think that she is really good in this movie. Actually, I like her in a lot of films anyway. But there's this dance number when she's out on a stage, and he turns into the mask, and he goes and he dances with her, and he turns the whole place into a big dance number. And it's like such a great sequence. And just like her, even like one thing that really pops out with her, sometimes she has this like kind of red lipstick on in some of these nightclub scenes, and that just really pops in the 4K. But she looks gorgeous in this scene, and he dances with her, and it's funny because there's another character played by Amy Yazbek, who's a reporter, who kind of seems like the more likely character to be his love interest, because Tina, Cameron Diaz's character, is she's working with these mob characters. She actually helps them earlier on. She goes into the bank trying to case the bank, so it kind of seems like a femme fatale character, but she ends up being the love interest, kind of flips it on its head, and they end up flipping that trope on its head a little bit, the femme fatale. The director, Chuck Russell, he does have a very nice interview, a newly shot interview on here, the 2025 interview. There's a lot of interviews actually produced for this set, but he has a really nice, about 20-minute interview. Now, Chuck Russell, he directed Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. I recently did a review from the Steelbook collection of that, and that is probably that and the first Nightmare on Elm Street, those are my two favorite of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. I really like the third one. Now, after doing that, he kind of wanted to get out of the horror movies. Even with this one, when they first approached him with it, they wanted it to be a horror movie, and it went through several different drafts to at first, and then he really didn't want to do that. He wanted it to be more like what it is. So it's interesting listening. Now, there's also some interviews with the writers and the creator of the comic. I do want to throw out before I'm going to talk about the writing here in just a moment. But as far as another movie that Chuck Russell also directed, another horror movie, is the 1988 remake of The Blob, which I think is friggin' fantastic. I've seen that one a bunch of times. But as far as the writing, I thought it was very interesting. And so they basically, the comic book was very dark, and then they went to they had another writer. I don't think he's named in this one, who wrote a dark script, and then they hired a second writer. I think that I can't. I'm not going to say their names. I'm going to mix them up. But the second writer, it has an interview. There's like a segment on here that has all three of these guys being interviewed. He went in there and he made it lighter, and he added the dance stuff. He even came up with the dance number, that the famous dance number they do from Ricky Ricardo, like Cuban Joe, I believe is what it is, in the middle of the movie. And it's that scene is just so, he comes out and there's cops surrounding him and he starts dancing, and then all the cops start dancing, and that's how he gets out of it. It's such a live scene. But he did that script and he turned it in, and it wasn't quite right. And then they hired a third writer, and that writer added the dog and Cameron Diaz's character and kind of livened everything up. And then so that's from that process through different people kind of taking it from that dark comic to the movie that it is. I think it was very interesting listening to the writers talk about it. Another special feature. Another interview was the visual effects supervisor, Scott Squires. I'm going to go ahead and try to pronounce these guys' names. The creator for the writers, just because I screwed that up a minute ago. But Mike Richardson is the creator. Mike Werb is, I think, the third writer, and Mark Verheiden was the second writer, I believe. Okay, but Scott Squires also has an interview on here and he talks about he was the visual effects supervisor, and he kind of talks about that, and it's also really nice. These are all new interviews made specifically for this release. And then there's another one with the editor, and that one's only about 6 minutes long. And then Amy Yasbeck, who plays the reporter who was kind of set up to be a love interest but ends up not being. She has an interview on here. It's about 12 minutes long. Now, I knew I recognized her from something. I couldn't quite place it. And she was in Robin Hood Men in Tights, and she plays Marion in Robin Hood Men in Tights. And then there's the last interview. Well, the last interview for the special one. There's also some kind of essay on here as well that's brand new. The choreographer, Terry Evans, talks about how he was approached to choreograph the scenes, and he actually gets an opening title credit. And the studio didn't know anything about these dance numbers or the musical part of this movie, and he was trying to keep it hush-hush. And he actually, in the interview, the choreographer says the director, Chuck Russell, came up to him and said, "Hey, the studio doesn't know about it, but this is actually a musical. We're trying to hide it, so we're going to keep this on the down low." And then there's also a lot of archive special features as well. So this thing is packed full of archive special features and brand new ones that were made specifically for this. It doesn't have interviews from the main cast, like Jim Carrey or Cameron Diaz or Peter Green or Peter Riggert plays the detective in the movie. So, but it doesn't have those guys doing interviews. But it does have one actor interview. But it's nice having those. It's nice having brand new interviews and a perspective from 2025, looking back on this movie they made in 1994. And everyone involved with it seems to be pretty happy with the way that it turned out. Let's go ahead and rate this movie on a scale from 1 to 5. 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. I'm going to give this movie a 4-star rating. I think this movie is delightful, and upon this rewatch, I was even maybe more delighted than I was the first time I watched it back in the day, and subsequently the times I watched it after that. But I've always had a fun time with this movie, and it really holds up. And this performance, Jim Carrey's performance, is even like, back then it was, I always thought he was just on all the time, but it's nice the different performance in here when he's not the mask. And you can see from that things that he would later do, like the Truman Show and what the hell was that? Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. You can see that are already kind of there, and you can see why people would cast him as something that wasn't just like in your face, like physical comedy. As far as what Arrow Video has put upon us here with this 4K UHD release, I do wish there was a Blu-ray included in here. You have to buy that one separate. But with this physical packaging and this fantastic new 4K UHD transfer, I'm going to give them a 4.5-star rating. I think Arrow does friggin' fantastic work. They're one of the better of the boutique labels out there. So if you haven't done so already, if you would like this video and you see this box right here, if you click on that, you can go ahead and check out that review video I did of Spawn recently. So go ahead and click that. Check out Spawn. I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films. Thanks for watching.